Hi again, Linda Gale here, coming to you with another instalment about change. Today I'd like to focus on our resistance trigger patterns. These are really powerful pieces to understand about how you might react to change, how you might behave, and also why. In an earlier video, I spoke briefly about how most of our decision-making capacity has actually been formed when we were very young children. And most of us are operating unconsciously on these behaviour patterns. Now, for some of us, or in some situations, we may have found that certain behaviour patterns that we use to keep ourselves safe, especially regarding change, may not be suitable for that particular situation. So by talking to you today and sharing about these 9 common resistance triggers, the power in this piece is where you can start to identify even more clearly and more consciously what your main pieces of resistance are, what triggers you to stop and resist change. Now, sometimes that's great and sometimes it can hold us back. So it's about being able to be conscious and aware to determine if these particular triggers serve you the best or not. And so as an adult who we can be informed, we can make new decisions. We can actually change our behaviour patterns with our eyes wide open based on knowing what will work with us best. So today, the 9 resistance triggers I'm going to talk to you about. The first one is simply where we feel we can't cope with the change. And this is quite common, we've all felt it at different times, but what it creates is a sense of overwhelm in some cases, where we just feel that there's not a lot of control involved, it's going to happen, and it's just there's so much more happening in life, or we've got all these other things going on. It's just that one last straw kind of thing, and that can create overwhelm. So if that's a common trigger for you, it's the whole point of this is to be able to go, where does that come from? Why do I feel that? And just quickly, I want to share with you, when we get triggered, it doesn't matter in what way, chemicals are released in our body. Now, what's really interesting, science tells us that when these chemicals are introduced, the exact same chemicals are introduced whether we feel anxious or whether we feel excited. The exact same chemical reaction within our body. So whether I feel anxious and overwhelmed or whether I feel like, okay, this is going to be good, I can actually make a clear adult decision on what I want to feel. I can choose this because the chemical compounds that are released in our body are the same. It's what we attach, what emotions we attach to that. So sometimes if we don't feel like we can cope with change, it can be overwhelm. So instead of feeling overwhelmed, what is something else that you could replace that word with and choose to feel that instead? And the whole theme you'll find when I talk about resistance triggers today is being able to choose consciously and as an adult what you want to feel about proposed change. And that gives us that sense of control, which is what we crave. So that's the first resistance trigger. One of the other triggers is not understanding the change and the potential effects that change might have. Now, this one's probably the most simplest to correct because most of the time it's usually a poor communication issue. So it can be simply a matter of asking questions. Now I'm going to ask you a question now. In any conversation or any situation, who do you think controls that? Who controls that conversation, or who can control that situation? Who do you think that might be? I ask this question often. I ask it almost every time I teach. And some of the answers, it might be the person talking or whoever's in charge, whoever's opening up the conversation. And, potentially they're all correct answers. But the one absolute correct answer is simply the person who asks the questions, right? Because we've been conditioned as young children that when someone in a perceived position of authority asks us a question, we have been taught to give an answer. So where we feel, we're not understanding change or how that's going to work out or what that's going to create, questions are the best tools in our kit. We don't have to ask them in an aggressive way, but simply by asking questions that allows us to understand more what we need to understand and have in our minds about change. And that can also bypass a whole lot of, emotional triggers where it go to overwhelm or all those sort of things. So learning to ask questions is the fastest, easiest and most surefire way to overcome that piece of resistance by not understanding. So the third trigger, the third piece of resistance is sometimes we will feel that our status can be affected by different changes. Now let me just talk about the piece on status for a moment. Whatever your role in this world, mine, everyone around us, we all have status, we all have positions, we all have titles, we all have roles to play. Now that could be a title in your work, whatever your position might be. It could be if you're a mum or a dad or an aunt or an uncle or a sister or a friend. We all have roles in people's lives and our own. But each of these roles gives us a level of status. Now, why status is hugely important is it allows us to feel secure. And if we go back to that brain piece that talks, is involved with all our decisions, if we feel secure and safe, that's a really good thing. But if we feel people don't acknowledge our status, or if we feel that change is going to lower our perceived status, that can make us insecure. Now, I don't know about you, but I know for me, when I feel insecure, I don't usually operate at my best. I don't make the best decisions. Maybe that's the same for you, right? So, again, questions. Get a level of understanding. This is the answer to most of our triggers. It's a really powerful piece here, just asking questions. So that's the third trigger. So think back, is this something that's common for you? And if it is, great, because this is where the first part is awareness, where you can start to identify what pushes your buttons, what makes you resist change. And sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, sometimes I'm resisting change that would actually be a good thing for me, but because maybe I don't understand it, or I feel that it's just, changing my status or whatever it might be, I automatically want to resist it. And so it's a matter of becoming conscious, and it's like, hang on, why am I resisting? And as soon as you can understand the why, that's when you can learn to make those informed adult decisions. And we can stop doing this so much in here. Okay, so the fourth trigger is where we don't trust the person that's proposing the change. Now that could be in our workplace, it could be in our social life, it could be in our personal lives. It's really important that we have trust. It's really important that we feel safe and have that. So essentially where that trigger comes up is there's no rapport, there's no connection being established. It's interesting, I teach and train all different audiences, and I watch other trainers, and some people will come in and they'll start their session and they'll get straight into the course content or whatever they're teaching, and they get into it, and I watch the audience and how they react. And I do things a little bit differently, and there's nothing wrong with that way, it's just different to my way. But when I go in to work with a group, I will invest a fair piece of time at the beginning just to do nothing more but to build rapport, to create a connection. Because I know if I cannot provide a feeling or a level of trust with my audience, why would they trust or listen to what I'm sharing with them? So it's about getting to know someone, making us all have an idea of who's who in the room and how we could work together. And again, that feeling of it's safe to be here, it's safe to have conversations. And I find that works so much easier than if I jump straight on in and I have an expectation that people will automatically trust me. Because as you know, it doesn't work that way, right? And can I ask you, if someone breaks your trust, how eager are you to give it back? It doesn't happen very often, or at least it doesn't happen to the way it was. So building trust is huge, and that can create or bypass a lot of the need for resisting change, because if we trust the person, we're more likely to feel safe to go with the change. So that's the fourth trigger. The fifth one is sometimes change, depending on the context and where it comes from, can make us feel powerless. And when we feel powerless, it feels like we have we're not in control of what's going to happen. We're not in control of who makes decisions or how that works or what that might affect us. And that's a massive, massive piece. It will always affect our decision making. If we don't feel we have a feeling or a sense of being in control, then it's very natural for resistance to occur. But again, it's where you start to go, is that something that triggers me? Is that something that happens a lot? And the more you can understand what your particular triggers are, I'm assuming, like myself, you could be triggered by any of these 9, but there might be some that are more going to get you than others. And it's just a way of, working out what's going to work for you. What triggers you? How can you overcome this? How can you make yourself feel safe and strong within? And the end game, and I wish I had more bandwidth to share with, but the end game is when we work on change and resistance, it's like we're building that internal muscle of confidence and self-esteem. And if we have that real strong, it doesn't matter what happens in the outside world. We know and we have trust within ourselves, we can handle change. And the truth is, change happens every day. We get up and the day's different. The world around us is different. We cannot control most of the change in the world. But what we can control is us and how we react to it or don't, if it triggers us or not. And this is the first starting piece to becoming aware and being able to use this knowledge. Okay, so the next piece is sometimes people will resist change to gain attention. Funnily enough, I'm sure at some point in our lives we've all done it. Maybe you can relate to this. Maybe, do you have people in your life that you've noticed this about? But again, that part of your brain, that crocodile brain or croc brain as it's nicknamed, its only job is to keep you alive. And so it knows that if you have attention, if you gain anybody's attention, your chances of survival have just gone up. Now, ideally, yes, we want positive attention, but if that's not available, we'll take any kind. And so that's why you might see, especially in little kids, it's easy to see all through, but if you watch little kids, they're much more expressive. But you might have the ones that are the star of the party and they're always going to be the center and they're happy and they gain attention. It might be the cranky child that throws a tantrum. It might not be the best kind of attention, but they're still succeeding in getting attention. It could be the little one that gets in trouble and turns away and sulks and we chase it. It gets attention. So there's all these behavior patterns that your crocodile brain has developed for you to gain attention, because it knows if we have attention, we're better chances of staying alive, right? Rather than being out in that world all our own. So maybe one of your patterns is to gain attention because that makes you feel, oh, I'm going to survive on a very unconscious level at the moment. Hopefully it'll change from now. Number 7 is if change happens but you think it won't improve your situation. So if a change can happen that's actually going to make things harder for you or more challenging, it's natural for us to resist, of course. So it comes down to, security and whether you're valued in what you do and status and all those things combined. And value is a key piece with this particular resistance because, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had somebody do a favour for you? And if they've done a favour, what have you felt towards that person? My guess is you have felt that we owe them or we feel beholden to them because they've done us a favour. And so if we feel that change isn't going to improve our situation, that can affect our value, our feelings of, wow, am I not valued enough? And so when someone does us a favour and we pay it back, we feel valued. Has anybody ever taken your advice? How did you feel? Usually, if we give advice and someone takes it, we feel good because someone has valued our advice. Now again, that crocodile brain, really basic mathematics working here. If someone values me, or if I bring value to them, they'll probably want me around. Chances of survival goes up. You see a pattern in this in our behavior here? So if it doesn't improve, we feel it doesn't improve our situation in life, that can trigger all those things. So we then want to probably work overtime to make people feel, or add value, make people feel that we have to be a part of this. So we want to improve our situation in life, which is natural. So that may be a common pattern that you can relate to. The next one, what are we up to? I've just got a little list here. Number 8, we feel that there has been too much change for the sake of change. You know, why do we need to have this change? We've already done this, this and that. What's the point? And again, maybe we don't understand the bigger picture, but if we ask questions, those magic things, that can help us. And that's a way to overcome some of that resistance. So essentially, if we feel that there's change for the sake of change, or we're not understanding the reason or the need, it can make us have a feeling, a sense of being powerless, which then goes back to, if I don't have power, I don't have control. If I'm not in control, somebody else could dictate what happens in my life, and that's really bad. And so we would naturally resist that change coming in if we connected it back here in our brain to that sort of thing, not having power and not having control. So that's another trigger that you may relate to. And please, at any time, share this in the comments. You know, one of the things I love to say, is any thought or experience or comment that you have to share, that might be the exact thing that somebody else listening to this or reading in the comments might need. It might be that light bulb moment for them. So please feel free to share, ask any questions. We'll always come back to answer the best we can. Okay, so the last trigger here, the last common resistance here, is that proposed changes may conflict with your personal values or your personal beliefs. This is huge, like huge, right? There's a lot there, a lot in here I'd like to share on. But so, for example, for me, if I hear people gossiping and putting somebody down, to me that really, I don't like it. It goes against my grain. I don't believe in that behaviour, me personally. So if someone's trying to propose change around that in the way they're doing that, I naturally resist that, because I don't like the way they're doing it. I'm like, well, let's bring everybody in so we can all be open and own what goes on, but we all are part of that decision making, because I don't like that. That goes against one of my personal values. Now, the challenge here, or the problem here, is, in my experience, most of the population aren't consciously aware of their values. So my question to you is, are you aware of your personal values? Now, your values, the way I picture them, they're literally those lines in the sand. These are the things that you believe in so strongly that you will not, they're unbreakable rules, if you like, but they're personal. And so the problem I see is where most of us operate on inherited values, because we don't know any different. They don't teach us this in school. So unless somebody like me or other people that you listen to or work with bring this up in conversation, it's like, hang on, we're not taught to think about this consciously. So I know for myself, for many years I operated on inherited values from my mum and dad. Honesty and integrity and all these things, and they're very important to me, and they're still part of my value system. But two things here that I had to get clear was, firstly, whether you're aware of this or not, unconsciously we sequence our values. Some values we hold are more important than others, and I'll give an example of that in a moment. But the other thing, this is the key piece, and when I teach values I go into this quite deeply, is defining what a specific value means for you. So for example, let's say we have the value of honesty. What does honesty mean for you? How do you define honesty? Because we can look up the dictionary and we can all read the same definition, which is fine, but we may not always apply personally that same definition. So one of the things I think is very important is, if you identify your values, you must identify what they mean to you, how you interpret them. Because this is literally the framework that you operate your life from. So to give you an example, it was given to me many years, if I can remember it correctly. I was asked this question, so I'm going to ask you. If you had a very close friend and you found out that their partner in life was deceiving them, in some way. Would you tell them the whole truth as soon as you found out? Would you tell them a little bit but not too much because you don't want to hurt them? Or would you not tell them at all? Now, there's no wrong answer here. It doesn't matter what your answer might be. But when I was asked this question, I had to pause, because here I am saying honesty is one of my highest values. But I had to pause and think about it. And the question the person said to me is, why are you pausing? What's going on here? And what was going on for me was, it's not that I wouldn't want to tell my friend, but I would want to be very careful on how I told them, because potentially, I could be breaking their heart, or potentially it could be turning their whole lives upside down. So maybe for me, in some circumstances, I said, I might edit the information because I'd be concerned about hurting them. Now, again, doesn't matter what your answer is here. But what was interesting was the next question was, well, in this particular scenario, would you say that honesty is your highest value? Or would you say maybe friendship might be your highest value? And I went, oh, I never thought of that, right? I never even considered. And I said, can you explain more? And they said, well, honesty is pretty black and white. We tell people the truth or we don't, the whole truth or whatever it might be. And there's degrees. Or friendship is, based on the comment I made, this person said, you said you would hold back or maybe edit some of the truth because you didn't want to hurt that person. So maybe in this case, your value of friendship is higher than the value of honesty. And when they said that, it really, I really had to sit back and go, what is my value? How do I define that? And then, a whole lot of questions came from that. And so values, understanding what your values are hugely important in life, in my opinion, because if you're not very sure and very clear and definite on what you stand for in life or what you won't stand for, unfortunately, and I see this so many times in everyday life, I see people, when they don't know exactly what they stand for, they get pushed along into somebody else's belief system, which may not be in their best interest. It may not even be something they like, but it becomes what we do. It becomes a pattern again. So if anything from today's share, please start thinking about what your values are. Start working out what's important to you in life, what's negotiable and what's not negotiable, and what those things mean, how you define them. But there are the 9 common triggers of resistance when it comes to change. Like I said, this is just an introduction. Have a listen, write them down maybe, and identify what ones are most common for you. And the next question is why? Why do you get triggered by whichever ones? What does that make you feel? And the bigger work, and often, you need people to help you with, because it's hard to delve back, but often it's then working with someone going, where did that come from? Because for any challenge or any pattern that we have, the key is that we have to go back to the original piece where that was created in order to undo it. Thank you so much for staying the way. I hope that you got something out of this. Triggers, patterns, behaviour change. It's key to how we work in the world. It's key to what we achieve. It's key to who and how we show up every day.